That was like a Gatorade commercial. Can you give that one a hit one more time? Boom. Are we sponsored by Gatorade?
The audio only people will not know that I was just drinking from a Gatorade sports bottle, like a football player.
You need to get someone to like the water boy that like has to squirt it in like over the face mask though. You need someone to do that for you during the cast so that way you can just stay fully focused.
Hold on 1 second.
That's the best idea. Just have
you got all those little brother. How many little brothers do you have? Can't they do that for us, Mets?
Yeah, they need to.
Absolutely.
They're doing a stupid thing called school right now. Like,
what?
There you go.
Yes.
We'll just cast like this.
Is that a lax helmet? Is that a lacrosse helmet? Is that what that is?
What's that?
Is that a lacrosse helmet?
Hockey.
That's a hockey helmet.
Have you been playing hockey?
Last winter, yeah.
Very cool.
That's right. You're in that hockey league.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, awesome. That sports bottle there, that's like a real deal athlete on the field. Like, that's not your average Joe just working at their desk sports bottle.
They do sell them at stores, though. You don't have to be an athlete to. You don't have to show them any like credentials to get one.
You're a fraud.
Speaking of audio only stuff, do you want to show the dog again? I thought that was pretty cool.
Oh, sure. Well, gosh, he's like out on the floor.
That's early in the morning.
Come here. All right, so yeah, this is. Oh my gosh,
that dog is a beast.
He's an actual horse. Hey, buddy. Morning. Can you say hey to everybody? I think he weighs about 200 pounds.
What a beautiful dog!
Wow.
Yeah,
he's a
very,
star.
very beautiful. Yeah. Morning.
Is he friendly?
He's very, very friendly. Very, very cuddly, and he's awesome because he loves to snuggle and things. But like the other day, he wanted to show me some affection and kind of like pawed at me, and it felt like I got punched in the face by Mike Tyson, but with talons.
Yeah,
and like the little bitties, the nieces and nephews, they love playing with him, but it's also like you're on the border of actually dying.
He's a huge animal.
Could literally kill you.
What type of dog is that?
That's a Great Dane.
Oh, man.
It's a Great Dane, yeah. So he's our literal silent guest today. Mm-hmm.
He embodies dogness in all its forms.
He does.
That's true.
My buddy Father Paul came over the other night and we got to hang out and do a little hike. Super beautiful hike up in North Georgia. And it was like every time he saw Gable, he would have to like react and exclaim like, "Whoa!" Whoa! Just repeatedly. What do you have a dinosaur in your house? It's like he never quite got used to it.
Yeah.
It was really funny.
It is funny that one of the things I was trying to explain in my homily last Sunday that I don't know if I got across was I used the G.K. Chesterton everlasting man thing of like, it's hard to explain the existence of human beings and evolution, and just saying like it took a really long time for us to evolve doesn't explain away the mystery of why there's such a freak animal that is hairless and two-legged and makes art and writes poetry and has language and builds civilizations and cities. Like it's not like there was this gradual thing where like monkeys made kind of crummy cities with bad sewers and dumb poetry, and like we came and made better stuff. It was just like this quantum leap up to humanity. But then you get used to it and you're just like, oh yeah, human beings, and they're not that big a deal. And you even lose your awe in your own humanity. And then the same thing with the Christian revelation, like the quantum leap in terms of civilization and morality and the dignity of women and things that like just didn't exist prior to the church. And still, we're not perfect, but we're completely different once Christ had risen from the dead, in terms of like the consequences of our behavior and our worship and things like that. And I think if we are not in awe, like just looking at Gable can make you be like, oh my gosh, dogness. Whoa. Just a simple instantiation of something kind of ordinary. You see it all the time, but it's in him. It's just for some reason wonderful because he's just like bigger and gentle.
Yeah. No, it's true.
Yeah.
So in other words, if it's not, if like going to mass or contemplating the mystery of existence is like boring to you, then it's not the fault of existence or the mass or any of these wonderful things. It's that we are not opened, so that was what I was trying to get at, like the deaf mute guy being opened up, like Jesus plugs in his fingers into his mouth and ears and says, Ephatha, be opened. Because the universe is open. It's transcendent. It's not imminent and closed off. But we are closed off, like our minds and our hearts think the world is just, or we get used to like a certain habit of thinking or feeling that's like, man, this is not that great. But then you see Gable and you're like, no, it's great.
Right. Something that opens up, broadens the horizon. Yeah.
That's good. It reminds me, I've listened to some of, I'm almost through it, but Matt Fradd interviewed Peter Kraft a few weeks ago. I think it was just a few weeks ago. Have you listened to this, Metz?
Yeah, I did. Mm-hmm.
I thought it was great. Peter Kraft he just seems really,
he's phenomenal.
Like an interview like that makes him seem even cooler than listening to his talks.
Yeah.
But the guy's awesome. But they were talking about a lot of different things, but he had this definition of sloth that I just thought was really, really cool. And he just said sloth it's the inability to love something that is lovable. And he was just talking about how like the great kind of conveyor of sloth in today's world is just distraction. Kind of always has been, but in a particular way in our world today through technology, phones, everything like that. It's distraction makes us slothful, which isn't the same thing as lazy necessarily, but I like that definition of there's this inability, inattentiveness to love something that's lovable.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
And it's kind of like you need to marvel at Gable, but sometimes you don't.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's what he says is like the worst fruit that's bore from sloth is not, it's not even necessarily like a disordered manifestation of your desire for God. It's just straight up boredom.
Yeah, he had an interesting line, and I need to listen to it again, but I think he said the greater evil, even than pain, is boredom.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is so wild.
Yeah.
I thought that interview was, Matt Fradd did a really good job with it because Kreeft is such an elusive philosopher.
Oh, man. Yeah.
He would ask you a question, like pretty straightforward type question, and Kreeft would give this like really poetic kind of like indirect
question
answer.
in response. Yeah.
And Fradd would just be like, There's no continuity to the interview. Yeah. It was really like, man, he's doing a really good job with this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I remember I used to give a talk every year when I was in seminary to the fifth graders in my parish, my home parish CCD class. The mom who did the catechism class made a connection with me, and so she wanted like a vocation talk every year. And this sister who was like the DRE and I would give a talk on religious life and priesthood, respectively. And every year I'd hone it down to like, what, as a fifth grader, like what could you possibly understand about discerning a vocation and what God wants you to do with your life? You're just like, you're still playing and like running around playgrounds, and you're not thinking about the deeper desires of your heart. I mean, you can be inspired to want to be, certainly when I was in 5th grade, I wanted to be things, particularly Michael Jordan. You imagined yourself as an adult and you're like, that would be cool to be that kind of adult. But in terms of like a realistic, discernment and listening for God's will in your life. And I settled on boredom. I thought that's probably like the deepest spiritual feeling a kid has. And I don't know if that's true, but I remember being bored a lot as a child. And there's a certain helplessness to it because you just realize your own poverty, that you can't do anything to make yourself happy, no matter how many toys you get. Like, you get a Christmas present or something like that, and you're looking forward to getting it, and then you get it and you get bored of it. What is that feeling? It's running up against the poverty of humanity, that we are a question mark to ourselves, and we do not have the capacity to fulfill what we ultimately desire. We're dependent on someone else, some transcendent other, to provide the thing we want the most, which is, permanent, eternal communion and the joy that comes from it. So it's just using that like as a little signal, a little semaphore for the kid to be like, God is pointing you somewhere. And then I use this goose story, the geese that are trapped out in the wintertime, that analogy. You ever heard that? The guy doesn't go to Christmas Eve mass because he doesn't believe, but his wife and kids go. And he's like a farmer. So he's sitting there after dinner, looking out the window as his wife and children are at mass. And he sees these geese out in his field, and it's a snowstorm, and he has to get his gloves and hat and coat and stuff and trudge out into the field. And he's trying to help the geese by getting them in the barn because they're lost and they're going to freeze out there. And they won't get in the barn because they're afraid of him. But their fear is keeping them out in the cold where they're going to die. So he has this thought like, oh man, if I could just be a goose for a minute, I could like lead them in. They'd trust me because I'd be one of them. And then the whole incarnation and everything makes sense to him of, why God had to do it this way, even though it was too wonderful to seem. It seemed like a fairy tale to him until he saw like what love and stuff actually looks like. Anyways, I just use the freezing cold as like, that's boredom. It's this signal that you're not where you're supposed to be. Here's Gable.
He's like a shark in water. Hey, buddy. You like kind of see him coming, just passing
his
underneath.
Dorsal fin.
Yeah.
Oh my God, what is that? What is that? Okay, you gotta lay down though.
But you know what I mean? Like there's that's desolation. Maybe is the cold, the signal that you. Isn't that one of the rules of discernment? Like if you're in desolation, to act against it. To notice that you're feeling this. And that God is leading you in somewhere else to consolation, into communion. That would be the barn. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not a master on rules of discernment, but
I don't think any of the 5th graders became priests, but that was not that long ago, so they're probably in college now. There's still time.
They probably listen to this, so shout out to them.
Just shout out to all those 5th graders. Mm-hmm. Remember that story of the geese I told?
Do you remember that?
No, because I was bored.
I was bored by your talk. That's the irony of ironies.
I don't remember having that feeling very much as a kid, like not being very aware of that. Did you?
Well, you also had like 20 siblings. I think that helps.
True. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I mean that's very true. Did you have it when you were a kid, Rob?
I don't remember it much, but it's kind of, I don't know if it's a little cliche, but you see the whole idea of we just got outside a lot, and like just to be able to, gosh, I mean, we every day, like we even not in the summer, we'd get home or whatever from school, and we'd usually watch, like, I don't know, I was with my brother all the time. We watched the old show. It might be still on ESPN. PTI. You guys ever watch that show? Pardon the Interruption.
Pardon the Interruption. Yeah.
Every day. Before that, we would always watch Dragon Ball Z. But almost like daily, we would just go out to like the hedgerow behind the house and just play, out there, which was, So I actually don't remember being bored that much
even in school kid. And
I probably was in school. I don't really remember, honestly.
Yeah, I think I do remember it in school, but like it was probably more the stupid stuff that I would do in response to that feeling of boredom to try and escape it. Mm-hmm. Like when you're bored and you're a fourth grader and you want to not be bored, but you're also not supposed to break the rules. It's like one of those things is going to win.
Right.
Yeah. So I wasn't bored very often. But I listened to, it's an interesting deal. There's this guy, Dr. Stephen, I think it's Stephen Blackwood, and he did a recent interview with Peterson on his podcast. And this guy, he grew up in Canada, and I'm pretty sure he's a Catholic. That was the vibe that I caught from him. But he grew up in a farm town up in Canada and is actually founding a college down in Savannah, Georgia. So he's moved down there, and I can't remember the name of the college that they're founding, but it's based specifically on the humanities. And the guy grew up in the philosophical tradition and has apparently a pretty great book on Boethius and the consolation of philosophy. And
where's Father de Gaulle called him? Boetius?
Boethius?
Boetius?
Boethius? But he'd just eat the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
Boetius? Take this.
That's an inside joke.
The most epic liturgical voice ever, specifically at the institution narrative. Yeah. And Peterson was asking him what got him into the intellectual tradition to be able to, I think, understand like the beauty of existence and creation and the higher order of being in a way that allowed him to think about it conceptually. And it was interesting. The way he answered it wasn't like, well, I had this teacher, I read this book. He actually went back to his childhood and said, I grew up like working on a farm, and I had 9 brothers and sisters, like this big family. There were 10 of them together, and they were able to live in a life of like relative harmony with each other and with creation that he was so grateful for. That essentially what he was saying was it set the groundwork for him to actually think about the higher things because he had lived them correctly in his childhood. So that then when he would conceive of the good and how it manifested itself in reality, like you can't think about that stuff abstractly or like in a vacuum. Mm-hmm. And so the formation of his childhood actually, it wasn't the idea of the good. It was like the lived good that then allowed him to think about it in a more abstract way. Mm. And yeah, so just trying to think about like, well, how are we able to enjoy some of those higher being, metaphysically or ontologically speaking, goods? And like a lot of it, you can't just naturally create it because we do have that poverty. And if we don't know how to think about it and to enjoy the experience of the good because we've never been taught it, like you can't just create that out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Does that make any sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it reminds me a little bit, just as another story though, but we had for our priest convocation 2 or 3 years ago, but we had Anthony Esselin. I think I may have talked about it on the cast when we had.
Yeah.
But who wrote Paradise Lost? Milton, is that right? Yeah. And I think he almost has Paradise Lost memorized, maybe. Esselin does. And because I think it was that he said that he had some just insane line. It was so cool, but he said that he has to be careful to not quote the Satan monologues of Paradise Lost because he doesn't want to like lose himself in them. They're that kind of just like deep into the human psyche and human soul. But the reason that he wanted to do it was because I don't know if he was a student. Somehow he met like a very simple farmer kind of in his studies. And this guy had memorized the entirety of Paradise Lost, and he could just recite it to himself as he was like plowing the fields and everything like that.
Whoa.
Isn't that crazy?
That is amazing. Mm-hmm. Right. So it makes sense. Like the implications of not having that growing up, I think it does lead to something like a boredom. Mm-hmm. Because if you don't know how to think about the good or to enjoy the good or understand it correctly, then you're faced with the beauty of creation and you're just kind of like,
right.
You know, I got this YouTube video, and then I dig into that, which gives some immediate stimulation rather than diving into.
Well, it's more and more disembodied, you know, like I'm thinking about we talked about farming a long, long time ago, and you brought up the video game Harvest Moon, Mike, I think it was called.
Love it. Loved it, dude.
And to me, that's like archetypal suburban. Just like Paperboy was a video game we played a lot. I never had a paper route as a kid. My parents' generation, everybody had a paper route, but we played Paperboy, which was a Nintendo game about being a paperboy.
Right, it's like one step removed.
Right. Which just
away
kind of
from
like
humanity.
It sucks the life out of those things where, I mean, that I think is the paradox, is that we have this poverty native to us that we can't make ourselves happy, but yet the world is full of wonder and gables and things in the simplicity of it, you know? So like, I like how my brother's kids, you know, they have hobbies like fixing bikes or having chickens, or my nephew works on his car and stuff like that, like things with their hands and with nature, even though they live in a subdivision, a suburb of Dallas. I think it's possible in the modern context to have a life that's in touch with reality and nature and humanity in a way that's not simply virtual and digital, constantly like simulacrum of real life. You're actually living a real life. Because I do think that's the paradox, is like not trying to go up to happiness or joy by like escaping humanity, but settling into it more humbly and in a more earthy way, like the farmer memorizing Milton while he's digging in the dirt and spreading manure. You know, it's like that's a perfect image of having your feet firmly on earth, but your heart and mind pointed towards heaven. You know, it's not, and God knows we need that very badly, like to receive reality rather than try to create a version that we prefer or we think is going to make us happier, because reality is reality. That's it. It's the only one we got.
That's so cool to think about that farmer. That makes me want to memorize poetry.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Gosh, I read Paradise Lost, and actually that's not even true.
No, I couldn't finish it. It's hard.
It is hard. I had somebody read it to me on Audible.
That's smart.
Yeah.
I tried that with the Brothers K, but then I was like, I'm not listening. I thought this would be easier because it would just like get it by osmosis, but now I don't know who anyone is.
Oh, I'm sure with the Brothers K, yeah.
I tried Crime and Punishment on Audible and I couldn't do it.
I think I actually read Crime and Punishment. That's a little shorter than some of the other Dostoevsky, right?
Yeah.
What was the one you mentioned the other day? The Death of Ivan Ilyich? Is that Dostoevsky?
That's Tolstoy.
Tolstoy.
Yeah, that's a wild book. That's short. It's like 100 pages or something like that.
Like the Mice and Men of Tolstoy.
That's the one. If you want to be very firmly planted in the reality that when you die, very few people are going to care, read The Death of Ivan Ilyich. Dude, that'll make you live in reality.
Yeah.
Phew. What a sales pitch. We should.
Seriously.
Yeah,
Is that on the back of the book?
it should be. I read that thing when I was on a quarantine for COVID, which is a bad idea.
Wow.
Yeah, man.
That's the spiral.
I went into the cave. I don't know if I came out.
Dang. Well, hey, I want to share a little. I mentioned Father Paul Porter came over, and we got to hang out the other day for Labor Day, and we went just talking about like enjoying the goodness of creation, and we were able to go on this awesome hike, and this hike is called Ravens Bald. It's up in North Georgia, and it's got like tons of waterfalls that run along the trail. And at one point, we had kind of scaled up through the side of the mountain and then cut up in through a crevice that was created through the waterfalls. And Rob, I actually thought of you because when we were out in Colorado, I remember when we climbed that rock face and you were like, dude, y'all are stupid idiots. You could have died. And it wasn't quite.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we ended up making it up to the top, and you kind of you had this mountaintop type experience where you're looking down at the waterfall and looking down at the valley that runs through. And we had bought this big, unnecessary, overly sized Foster's. So they crack open this Foster's and we're eating beef jerky up at the top. But the whole time that we were hiking and walking and climbing, like we were just having the most delightful, but also very mentally stimulating type conversation. And so it was this coupled delight of enjoying creation, like right in front of us, but then also being able to talk about some of the higher things, like the substantial things that were going on, and enjoying friendship as well in the midst of creation. And we ended up going down into one of the waterfalls, and man, we were hiking in our bathing suits. So we hopped in our bathing suits, took off our shirts and dove into one of the like accumulated little pool areas just beyond the waterfall, and swam into the waterfall, which was freezing cold mountain water, and just stood underneath the waterfalls. And just there's like tons of people that are hiking this trail on Labor Day, and I'm sure they thought we were insane people. They just looked down into this little gorge, and there's just two shirtless guys underneath these waterfalls. And it's so cold, when you catch your breath, you just have to scream. And so we're both just down there screaming our heads off. And the water is so loud that I can't even hear, like I can barely hear my own scream, but I have no idea. Like, I don't know if they could hear it. They just think we're two crazies that need a bath or something like that. But it was just like the most delightful and reconnecting day. It's like that the divine wet willy there.
Nice image.
I have not heard that.
Here's a question on that, because that's cool. Yeah, don't get me wrong, and I love
tread lightly,
Paul.
Rob.
I can cool see you guys doing
it's also lame.
But that doesn't sound like a higher thing to me. I was like, I don't know. I probably wouldn't have had that much fun like doing that. There's like a subjectivity to it there.
I think that's fair.
Where something like, and again, maybe we don't have time to get into this, but that's at least the idea of the classics, is they kind of like transcend subjectivity in a certain way. So it's just a question there. Because I don't know. I don't want to jump into freezing cold waterfalls. I'll be honest. It's you. You do you, man. You do you.
No, I wouldn't say that particular element of it was.
Right.
But
that's what I'm asking.
The experience as a whole, I do think it was. And I guess that's a particular instantiation of something like going out to Colorado and having some of those beautiful hikes and just spending time solely for the fact of like out there enjoying creation and trying to receive it and enjoy it and delight in it, like I think we're supposed to. Um, and I do think there is something. I mean, maybe that's just a modern, postmodern thing where we have to do that, where it would have been more naturally occurring. But that seems like a necessary, um, higher good. That yeah, it would have probably organically came up more frequently, but like I have to create that experience. I have
Mm.
to actually choose to leave to go and have an opportunity to get plugged back in. Um,
Well, there's a lot there that's just sort of like good for your neurotransmitter life. You know, there's unexpected beauty, there's surprise, there's the communion of a close friendship where you feel like you can talk about anything, and there's also like the privacy of being out in the middle of nowhere. You can scream and play and take safe risks, and you know, like do something hard and painful, but that's also delightful. And you get out of the water and it's hot, and you're like, oh, that felt refreshing. And but there is also, I think, higher stuff there. Like the kind of conversations you were having, and also your own subjective experience of the beauty of creation and your own humanity, and being like, there's something also kind of sacramental about getting in the water. Like you see the waterfall, and I've had the same experience in Colorado when I was out there for CPE. I would like sit in the hospital for 10 hours visiting dying people, and I would just like have to get out, and I'd go up the Boulder Gorge or Boulder Creek or whatever, and just get in the water. Sometimes I'd be hiking around, and I'd bring my fishing rod and stuff like that, and be like, I just want to get in that, under that waterfall. And it was freezing cold. It was all snow melt, and it was just like reminding me I was alive, and that I didn't have to feel guilty that there were people stuck in fluorescent lit rooms with tubes in their bodies. That might be me someday, but it's not me today. And I was able to be there with them, for them, but here I am alive, and God is here. And I don't know, there was something important to me in that moment to do that. What you're just describing, Mike, is plugging in. I was by myself, although I did, my brother Tyler came out, and we did a couple of these trips. When he was out there, I was like, come look at these places. It's beautiful. So
yeah,
yeah,
I think if I was by myself, I wouldn't have
you wouldn't have
enjoyed
gotten
it
in.
nearly as much. I might have
But like
gotten in,
you're
but
hunting, Rob. Like when you described you wouldn't enjoy that, I thought you sitting in a deer stand and hunting. Like I feel like for you that is probably a way to plug in to nature and to God and to the created world. But to me, that's very boring, and I don't like sitting there just getting cold in a tree stand. But I get it. I think it's the same principle.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, but I guess I didn't mean to like poke at the experience. I just meant to like kind of ask the question of like what takes it to something, like what makes I don't, this is what's sticking out. I don't know if this is exactly hitting on it, but what is it about like the classics that allowed them to like kind of transcend certain elements of subjectivity?
right. Well, because we would still say that they don't transcend all. Right. So your question is more about the classics than it
Yeah,
is about the actual experience.
the
Yeah.
higher things, if you will.
Right. Right. Because even there is a element of subjectivity. Like there does have to be some sort of a context in order to understand the author.
And
And
like, I mean, it's put in like a language too. I mean, so there's that aspect of it as well.
right. Right. Um, yeah. And I think about, I mean, kind of like I've always been so fascinated by how the Blessed Mother reveals herself to certain people. It's the same Blessed Mother, but then it's so specific to them. Um, that I mean, she's this great light that reflects the light of the Lord. But then it's also in a way like revealed so that they can actually receive it. But I don't know, the classics what makes them touch onto those transcendental levels, I don't know. Connor, you got anything for that?
I'm trying to find this quote online of Lacordaire. I read it in a Priest Is Not His Own by Fulton Sheen. It's in a book called Letters to a Young Man or something like that. I think it's Lacordaire said, in response to this young man who was talking about his encounter with God and nature and the mountains and trees and stuff. It's like, I too enjoy the mountains and the trees and the streams, but I think you get to a certain age and you can enjoy only souls. And it's something like, as you mature, your body withers and you can't get up on top of mountains and under waterfalls and stuff like that, but you can always love. And so I think there's something to the classics of just that it's the human experience is what's universal, like why we read certain books, or the Bible is obviously a classic. We say it's an inspired book. God is the co-author. It's the Word of God. But even if it weren't the Word of God, you'd say billions of people have read this book and they've all found something that has let them come back. And hear billions of people still to this day read the same book over and over and over again, year after year at Mass. And there's always something new. It's when you, I think, tap into something where like the soul is just plugged into God, and those things that remind us of Him, whether they're Gable or a waterfall or hunting, or even a good conversation, watching your nephew kill his first deer, or watch Porter stumble through a freezing cold waterfall like a dummy.
Don't get me wrong, it's awesome.
No, that guy's an idiot. Yeah, and that's what Kreef said in the interview about how do you know it's a good book. And I don't know if you would pin this to like the classics, but did Connor's audio, is your audio skipping? You can't hear that?
Oh, can't hear him.
Oh no.
Gosh.
His audio pooped out on us.
That's
well, just
right.
to finish the thought, he said that a good book is one that every time you read it, you get something new. Right. And so you can kind of read it, return to it. And that's definitely been true experientially.
That is true.
Yeah.
That's good. I loved when they were talking about they read the end of Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. And they were talking about how they both wept at the end. And that was very poetic of Kreif talking about that's why you fight wars, is so that little Sally can like sit on